Welcome. So glad you could be here with us. This is March 15, 2025, and the Tucson Astrologers Guild is excited to present two of our professional members who are going to be giving their presentation never seen before. This is going to be exciting stuff. We're going to start with Sara Bourland. She's been doing a lot of research on lunar wisdom, and I'm really excited to see what she's going to present. Sarah's been I'm sure she can explain a lot more about herself than I can, but she's currently writing a book on the deep symbolism of the moon, including material covering ancestral healing and epigenetics. As a shamanic practitioner, she is deeply committed to a magical approach, drawing from spiritual wisdom and blending it with scholarly research. Is a quintessential balance between heart and mind. So without further ado, let's put your hands together and welcome Sara.
Thank you, Gail. Just a second, let me put my water down. All right. So welcome. Just before we begin, I just want to take care of, let's see, can I, nope. All right, well, I'm not quite sure how to change the setting on this. Maybe that.
On the Zoom, you appear, so you're
okay, good. All right, you'll just have to tell me if I'm out of screen, because I'll try not to walk around. All right. So thank you, Gail. Thank you, Tucson Astrologers Guild, for welcoming me today. So I want to start with just asking everybody just to take a quick moment and to settle in if you're not already in a really good place, if you've rushed to get here. Just take a couple of deep breaths while we jump in, because this is, for me, a really important study of work. So I'm calling this today Facing the Darkness Within, Hard Aspects of the Moon. And I always like to start with an agenda. So I'm going to just do a quick intro, why the moon for me. We'll talk about the symbolism of the moon, which actually we'll be talking about that for quite some time. Probably a good half of my presentation is just really going into the deep symbolism of the moon and really breaking it down. We'll of course talk about mother, and then we'll get into the hard aspects themselves. Then we're going to talk about the aspects in planets, sample charts, and so on. So just before we begin, I want to ask everybody to just take a couple of moments and just think about if you can come up with some descriptive words or adjectives that can describe your mother or the person who raised you. So just whether you jot that down on a piece of paper, whether you write it in your phone or just hold it in your mind, but just something to think about with that. Because when we start talking about the moon, as astrologers, we always say that it's our emotional nature, but it really is so much more than that. That's the foundational piece. But often when we get into these places where we have the hard aspects of the moon, it can show up often as shame. And it's often things that we try to keep fairly not in the forefront or fairly unconscious. So what's my story? I have to tell you a fun story. In 2002, I actually had a reading when I used to live in Seattle with Jeff Jower. How many of you remember Jeff? Okay, so I drove the 2 hours, took the ferry, drove 2 hours over to his house and had a reading at his dining room table. And as we were sitting down, he had my chart in front of him. And as we're sitting down, he says to me, "Do we really have to talk about your mother?" And he starts chuckling. He had a great way of using humor to sort of diffuse what could potentially be really, hard information. And it stuck with me all these years. And it really wasn't until I really started doing my particular journey in terms of trying to heal that very difficult relationship with my mother and having a child myself and now a grandchild, that it really has come to the forefront of really that my chart really does sum up somebody who has a lot of mothering, nurturing types of stories. So, so what motivated me to write is I have many, many people who I've run across that if you think about their relationships, whether it's with others, it has a lot to do with having reactions in life. So things can come up and they'll have an emotional reaction to something, whether it's positive or negative, and that's tied to those relationships. So I have two sisters, and we all feel very much the same way about our mother. I'm the one who chose the Gemini approach, which was I need knowledge, I need information, I need to break it down. I have a Gemini moon, and I need to figure it out because I want to heal this relationship. So I went a very analytical approach. Then I have a sister who said, I can't cope, I can't deal, I'm disowning her. I will never speak to her again. And then I have another sister who said, she's the Cancer moon, and she said, I'm just too sensitive. I can't deal with it. I'm like this. I'm always like this. I'll never change. And so it was really interesting to me that there are so many different approaches that people can take in terms of dealing with their emotional nature, that I really want the world to raise our vibration in not just a way that feels like it's just something that people say that we connect into on Instagram. It's not just something, a tagline. That really, when we talk about raising our vibration, we're really talking about really doing the heavy work, which is really getting to the bottom of what it means to be human. What does it mean to have an emotional body? How do we cope with it? Do we face directly the things that are very difficult in our lives? Or do we use lots of strategies to try and make it go away? Well, I have a Gemini moon, so it's really easy for me. I never stay in one emotion for very long. So I'm always skipping across like a rock on a pond. So I want the world to be a happier place. So just really quick, this is my chart. I have a lot of hard aspects. We're only going to talk about the Ptolemaic ones today, but I have moon square Venus, Chiron, Uranus, and Pluto. I have a quincunx to Mercury and South Node. I do have a Cancer rising. That's a positive thing. North Node conjunct my ascendant right there. And the healthful aspects is I do have Sun, Mars in a helpful trine to the moon. So that's me. So, all right. We're going to talk about this section for quite a bit. So there's actually more than just 6, but to be perfectly honest, this slide was set up with such a nice format. I didn't want to try and change it. So when we talk about the moon, it's the emotions in the emotional body. It has a lot to do with mother and our primary relationship with her, including the feminine energy or yin energy. It is our safety and security. It has to do with habits and instincts. It also, as an extension, talks about ancestry. So it's not just us or our mother, but it's also, I really focus on the maternal line, but it also can be the paternal line, but it's where do we come from? What are the roots that bring us into this world? And as well as our home, right? And with an extension of that, it also has to do with belonging. And what I've recently been really trying to connect more deeply into is this connection to the soul. Because for this particular piece left me a little curious. I didn't have the grounding, I didn't have the knowledge in terms of how we were stretching from the moon to the soul. So I'll unpack a little bit of that for us today. So these are foundational. This is what we have within us that makes us human. Now, according to Rob Hand in the book Horoscope Symbols, he said emotions are one of the strongest signs that something deep within the self is being activated. So, what exactly do we mean when we say emotions? And believe it or not, when I started breaking down, like, what are feelings versus emotions? And again, this is all content in my book that I'm in the process of writing. It's like all of a sudden, what seems so obvious is a little bit more elusive. So when we say emotions, what are they? The definition is that emotions are feelings and reactions that can be both physical and mental. It can be conscious as well as unconscious. And when we talk about emotions or feelings, we're talking about things such as anger, fear, sadness, disgust, happiness and joy, shame or envy. That gives us an idea. So Brene Brown has written I think her most recent book called Atlas of the Heart, and she identifies 87 emotions. I had no idea there were that many. So she said that emotions and experience is what it defines us, and it means to be human. So why are emotions so important? Number one, there's a drive to change us. And when I've spent way too much time pondering emotions and having an emotional body, what I realize is that we have micro moments throughout our day, and some of them are unconscious, but we could be listening, like I was listening to NPR as I was driving up here, and they were talking about writing and writers, and so there was some connection I was having to it. There was a slight emotional reaction. I'm going to challenge you to, at some point, just keep track of how often you're noticing some kind of a reaction to what you're having. And I call these little ones that we're having like micro moments, because without our emotions, we're not connecting what's happening out in the outer world or in our mental world to our physical body, right? So how many of you, just show of hands, have been in a situation where you had something shocking happen and immediately you could feel it in your gut, in your stomach? Maybe even your digestion like went awry, like immediately. And so there is this mind-body connection that can be incredibly powerful. So emotions drive us to change. So if we think about, and often some of these things are unconscious and we don't know where they come from. But for example, I'm sure many of you know of either a man or a woman who has been in relationship after relationship that ends in infidelity or ends in money problems. And then next thing you know, this friend says to you, wow, I don't understand what's going on. Like, the people change, but the key scenario of the problem doesn't change. And that is a situation where the emotions are now saying, we've got a problem. There's a pattern pileup that we start to recognize. And it's our uncomfortability with those emotions that says something's got to change. Something has to change. So the moon is always running in the background, whether it's small reactions to things, such as a couple of weeks ago, I was at the grocery store and I'm a good driver, but I somehow misjudged what was happening in the parking lot and I pulled out, not very fast, but I pulled out, and this car, I don't know where they came from, and they honked their horn at me. And I immediately had this visceral like reaction of being honked at, because it's such a shocking noise and it feels so offensive, especially if they're laying on the horn versus a gentle tap. So I just raised my hands like, I'm human, I make mistakes, and like, apologized with my hands, and then everybody moves on. But those are moments, right? So we're having these things all the time. The moon is constantly giving us information about our lives. So reactions hopefully lead to awareness. And it's this instant information about the framework of our life, about safety and security, belongingness, maybe a childhood memory comes up, but there's always something that's running in the background that we're bumping up against how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our family, our situations. And this is really how change happens. So my next is looking at the north and south node of the moon and the connections to our personal moon and our nodes, because I feel like there's a much deeper story there in terms of what is our purpose. So who knows? That'll be oncoming. So Brene Brown says, in my experience in working with clients, the ability to name the emotion or experience is essential to being able to process it in a productive and healing manner. And that really is how we start taking the moon, which so much of the moon's territory is unconscious, and bringing it into conscious awareness. But it takes work and it takes reflection. So, but my goal with my book and with my work is to actually bring about people to raise their emotional intelligence. And for me, it's through astrology because it tells you what it is. All right, so mother. The next one is mother, feminine, and the natural cycle. So the reason the moon is so tied to mother is if we think about it, the experience with mother is so formative. This is what happens in utero. This is what happens in early life. We are a product of her. Now, this quote, actually, I ran across yesterday, and she's just an Instagram person, but it really struck me that every human came from a female body. And yet nothing on earth is as shamed or as criticized as much. And I think that really struck me in terms of if we think globally about the situation we're in right now, at least in society with our country. And I'm not going to talk politics at all, but the swing back to the feminine, the swing back to really recognizing feminine energy, which is not just a woman thing. Like we all have masculine and feminine or yin and yang energy, but trying to come back into balance and really recognizing the whole natural cycle and process of life. So we, of course, as a fetus are in utero, and we are in our mother's body. We are absorbing all of her psychic material that she is carrying. During gestation, we are perceiving everything that she thinks and feels and intuits. Her experience is our experience, her stress, her fears, her expectations. This becomes imprinted in our psyche. And so much of this can lay unconscious for many, many years. If you want to look at the prenatal experience, which I know some of you know this technique, you look at the 12th house, what's in the planets that are in the 12th house, as well as the 12th house sign, and then look to that planetary ruler for its condition. And this will give you a hint. If you want to look even further into the actual conception, I believe that's 9th house, which that comes from A.T. Mann's book, Lifetime Cycles. So much of our experience is colored by what we inherit from our mother in the first 4 years. So there's another technique, let's see if I have it here, called Ages of Man, which is a Renaissance influence. And 4 years of life is this maternal experience. So as we are born, I believe it's the first, it's 3 or 4 months of life. The infant does not recognize that they are a separate entity from the mother. Like they have no knowledge of that. And that as they mature and start to gain awareness of this physical plane, as a spirit, as a physical being, that they start to separate from mother. And that process takes a really long period of time. And it's through this separation that they start to really develop their individuation, right? Or the long story of individuation, but their independence and so on. So mother exists in our hearts, our souls, and our mind, and our body. She nurtures us. She may feed us intellectually, emotionally, and or physically. And so much of our early upbringing is imprinted by her. And we can see this in the astrology chart. And in terms of the feminine, and I won't go into too much of this today, but the moon is our physical experience. And when I was looking back at the traditional descriptors, I believe it's Valens. And when he talks about all of the descriptors for the moon, I was like, body. What do you mean the body is connected with the moon? Didn't make any sense to me. And it really took some time to unpack it. But if you are born into a female body with a uterus, with a womb, then you're going to have this very lunar cyclical experience. So as women, we go through many stages: the maiden, of course, the mother, and the crone. And during that fertile years of potential motherhood, you do go through this very lunar experience that is tied to the moon. So we have this approximately 28-day cycle of, fertility and so on. So through menses, we definitely are connected to the moon and into nature. All right. So just some keywords really quick. We have the tidal pole, which is very lunar. Women, menses, natural cycle, motherhood, birth, breasts, the relationship with your mother, your emotions, how you respond or react, instincts, habits. It's our deepest needs that's the territory of the moon. So safety and security, again, is another lunar quality, and it really is a result of that early relationship with mother. So this primal relationship is really where we gain this. It sets the tone about our levels of trust and belonging and safety and security that we feel in the world. If our early needs were met with love and devotion, then it's likely we have a fairly solid underpinning. But the moon in hard aspects can sometimes speak to issues of trust and when or how we feel safe and secure. And maybe it's in relationships, or maybe it's in our career or our work environment, or how we express ourselves, how we talk or speak, or just at the world at large, maybe on a physical level. But it can take all of these different iterations, because maybe we feel safe and secure in this arena, but not in another. Habits and instincts. So the moon is instinctual. We don't have to think about if we become endangered. If there's a bear in our path, we don't have to worry about what to do. We don't have to go logical and right brain and think about it. It just happens. There's something ingrained within us. So the instincts kick in. And then again, as we're thinking about this connection with body, our intuition comes from the limbic and amygdala brain, little portion in the center of your brain that is unconscious. And when I started thinking about it, traditional astrology says that the moon rules the breast and the stomach. And I was like, stomach? Why does it rule the stomach? Like, why wouldn't it rule some other things? And again, if you think about it with this instinct, number one, the stomach is where we process food. So when we ingest food, mother's breast, nourishing the infant, goes to the stomach. The stomach then transports it out and creates energy for us and life force, which is essential for humans. But then also, when you think about this instinctive piece, it does come from our gut. That old adage that says, trust your gut. And the gut is often referred to as the second brain because the extensive nerve cells line our digestive tract, which influence both emotions, linking mood and overall health. So the more I start researching into this, the more pieces are coming front and center that go, that makes sense, that makes sense. So what is Valens, like 2nd century? Is that right, Nestle? Okay. It's ancient astrology. So it's fascinating to me. Ancestry and roots. Of course, the moon is about our home. It's about belonging. It's what we inherit from our family. And it's not just mother and father, but it's tied to the downline. And of course, because it's the territory of the moon, I'm thinking about trauma. I'm thinking about unresolved family patterns, the things that I know as a moon square Pluto that is my job to heal in this lifetime for many generations of people. That I'm the brave soul who stepped up and said, I'll take that job this lifetime. So it's the ancestry carries the qualities and the emotions. And last October, I went to a 3-day workshop with the fabulous Lynn Bell and studying family dynamics, and spent 3 days with charts similar to this on the wall, about 10 of us analyzing, walking through, and really seeing the significant, and many of them were hard aspects, not necessarily to the moon, but just hard aspects in general, and seeing how they transfer down the family lines. And maybe one person gets a free pass in the family, one of the siblings, maybe not, but then, you know, all of us are dealing with different pieces. So some people step up to the plate to do a lot of healing work, and then others say, no, I'm going to do it next time around. Okay. Or, yeah. 2nd century. Thank you. Balance, 2nd century. All right. Where am I? So one of the things that is super interesting to me, so we have our DNA. Our DNA makes up our hair color, our eye color, and so on. We get 50% from mother, 50% from father. It's not the same 50-50 that our siblings get, but we get half and half. Then there's this thing called epigenetics, which is it's newer, not new, but newer research. And epigenetics is what happens when there are things that happen that encode your body that can be passed down to generations. So, for example, one of the research studies that I was reading about took a series of mice. And they took the male mice and separated from the female mice. And they said, okay, we want to study this epigenetics. And they said, we're going to put these male mice in some sort of a situation, and we're going to pump like what we consider a very pleasant scent, something like lavender. Pumped lavender in, but at the same time gave them a shock, an electrical shock. So every time they had the scent, they associate it with pain. So not what we would think. So then, because they didn't want to have the male mice share their experience with the female mice, they went ahead and separated them and actually used like whatever in vitro fertilization or something on the female mice, and just took the sperm from the male mice, and the female mice produced 3 generations downline of baby mice that all had that reaction to the lavender. They were expecting a jolt. So that's epigenetics. It's not inherited from DNA, but it is experiences that our ancestors had that encode that does get passed down. And again, these are things that, again, when we're talking about trauma signatures, that we can see in the birth chart, right? We don't know what happened, but we know the essence that there was a trauma. Maybe it's a Pluto signature, maybe it's a Uranus signature, right? Whatever the signature is, we can see it. And we have an essence of that there was a difficult experience, but we don't know how our client might be experiencing that, dealing with that, or living with that. So another example, and this one's interesting. So I had a woman that I knew. I didn't know her as an astrologer. I just knew her as a person. And she had her mother actually was a young girl, like 8 years old, living in Europe during World War II and went through bombings. And she escaped, came to the United States years later, got married, had a family. And so it was her daughter that I met. And her daughter, I didn't realize this till years later when I'm doing this research, but her daughter had described to me how she had to live. She lived on an island in the Pacific Northwest in a very isolated rural setting, because for her, loud noises really upset her more than just a loud noise. So whether it was a boom of a construction truck or traffic in the streets or sirens, really did a number on her. So she realized this, but I'm sure she didn't realize that this was probably that epigenetics, right? That signature that's passed down. So it's interesting stuff. So the body remembers. All right, now we're going to talk about the soul. So this was first brought to my attention in the fabulous book, The Astrological Moon, which actually is just a transcript of a lecture that Darby Costello gave, I don't know how many years ago. And she says the moon is a servant for both to the sun and the earth. She is the mediator between spirit and matter. She is the anima mundi, or the soul of the world, which is the collective unconscious. And so we think about moon as this consciousness. It is deeply symbolic. It is beyond verbal language. Never seems to be the right words to be able to describe it. It is larger than language can handle. And I wanted to, here's the thema mundi for it. Does everybody know what the thema mundi is? Okay. All right. So just really quick. It's not a real horoscope. It's a mythical horoscope that was used in Hellenistic astrology that kind of gives the logic behind the rulership. So we see here, everything is at 15 degrees. And we see that the ascendant is Cancer and the moon is in Cancer. You notice everything is in its domicile. So, and of course that couldn't really happen. But what I want to really focus on is there's a fabulous article that I've used with my beginner classes, and I just love this. It's on astro.com, was written by Patricia Godden, and it's called The Full Circle. And what this is this is the glyph of the components of the glyph that makes up every single planetary signature. So we have the circle, which is spirit. It's the spark of life that is in everyone. We have the semicircle, which is the soul. It is the non-material part, the sum of experiences gained during life in a physical body. And if you think of the crescent moon, it is actually 2 semicircles put together, makes the crescent moon. And you have the cross of matter, which is the physical body. And this is, of course, the physical form in a 3-dimensional world. So when you think about it, the astrology chart is you have spirit and then you have the cross of matter coming into it. So that's what gives it the angles. So it's the marriage of the two. And when does that happen? That happens at birth. right? So it's the beginning that is, when those come together. I absolutely love this, but when you look at, if you're interested in more, go and take a look at her article, and she breaks down every single planet, and she shows you that Mercury is made up of this circle, it's made up of this semicircle, and it has, the cross of matter. So it breaks them all down and it shows how the components go together. I find this incredibly, it's like symbolism of symbolism. Yeah, sure.
Fine. What's the author? What was the author?
Who was the author, please?
The author, it's actually right here at the bottom of my slides. It's Patricia Godden, and it was originally published in the Astrological Journal in, I believe, 2015. But it's kind of a permanent article on astro.com's website. It's a fabulous, fabulous article. It's called The Full Circle, Spirit and Matter is the name of the article. Yeah, because I know I tripped across it about 6 years ago for the first time, and I was like, where is that article? I was happy it was still there. Okay, so we're just going to break down the moon just super, super basically. The moon is, of course, we know her as Luna. She is, call her a planet, but she's not really a planet. It is a light that orbits Earth. She is the fastest moving in the sky, moves about 12 to 13 degrees in a day, and she changes signs every 2.5 days. So the one thing that we can really think about the moon is changeability. We are constantly seeing a new face for her through the phases, which is the relationship of the sun and moon together. So 2.5 days times 12, we're talking about an approximate 28-day cycle for her to complete the zodiac. So the moon rules the sign of Cancer. It's about instincts and intuition, nurturance, safety. It's reflective, and it's very internal. All right. Moon, mother. Again, women have this awesome power of being able to bring spirit into matter through birth. And we know that the relationship with our mothers is very complex. And yet this primal relationship is what is the foundation for our emotional body. Everything, our level of trust, intimacy, and so on, springs from this early connection. So my question to you, rhetorical question to contemplate, is what dynamic in the chart for yourself, your clients, your loved ones, in a square or an opposition, how much of that is yours and how much is yours to heal for your family line? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm not sure, I didn't actually track my time, so hopefully I'm doing good. So really quick, the hard aspects are, I don't really want to have a trigger warning necessarily, but I do want to talk about the fact that we're going to talk about a lot of things that can be really difficult for people. And again, because this is being recorded and it's a video, like the people that are here in person, I can kind of judge the room. I can see if somebody's kind of having at least an external showing of a response, but I can't really see what's happening. But when I really start looking at these things individually, I mean, they can be really difficult for people. So if you're doing this professionally, if you're working with people, I wouldn't necessarily suggest things to people. I would ask more questions and see what somebody wanted to share versus me throwing what I see on top of them, as they may not be ready for it. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to just use the Ptolemaic aspects only. We're not going to talk about quincunxes. We're just going to keep it really simple. We're not going to do signs or houses. We're just going to do the aspects between the moon and planets. I use an 8 to 10 degree orb, and know that there's so many possible meanings. We're just going to kind of dance through the potentials and alter it take what might work for you, leave the rest, but at least it gives you a sense of how vast this can be. All right. So squares generally are, with the moon, are internal. It's a dynamic energy. It can show up as challenge, frustration, conflict, resistance. With the moon in aspect to another planet, we're really talking about the other planet needs expression, okay? And growth occurs personally and for our clients and so on when we face our limitations and weakness versus what my one sibling does, which is run for the hills. Let's pretend it's not happening. I know she'll never watch this, so I'm good. So opening square can be intuitive and feeling, and this would be more I would use for transits, but it can be reactionary because in a transit with the moon, it's like this is new information. Well, maybe not new if we're young, but okay, maybe for a progression. But the closing square is more about you've been through the opening square, you've been through the opposition. Now the closing square is it's time to maybe heal this and move on, hopefully. The opposition is about polarization. Again, we're 180 degrees apart. There's a tension and an imbalance. Two forces that have different agendas, maybe seeing two sides too easily. That's my Gemini problem, is always being able to see two sides of things. But the growth happens when you can start to balance and integrate those two energies, the opposing energies. We're going to look at inner planets, the sun through Mars, which represent our personal lives. Jupiter and Saturn are more the social and relational planets. And then we're going to talk about the generational planets as well. But because they're connected to the moon, we're going to feel it in a personal way. All right, here we go. What you've all been waiting for. So the sun and the moon in relation to each other in either a square or an opposition may show up as the internal self, the moon, versus our expression or our external self. Sometimes it can make you feel like things are blocked. There might be an internal conflict between your wants and your needs. Again, needs being very moon oriented. Struggle between wanting nurturance and wanting your independence. Those that may have a sun square or sun opposition may feel unsupported because this goes back. And if you look through the chart lens at what was the relationship with parents, with a sun square or sun opposition moon, sometimes there can be a story about challenges between mother and father. And definitely sun represents father. So a hard aspect to the sun could be a signature of difficulties with father. Mercury is the emotions versus the rational mind. So again, this would be challenges with communication, could be challenges communicating what you're really feeling. And that for some people, this would show up as their needs are not being heard. Their emotional self may feel stifled, or they have distorted views on things. Again, think of that rational mind versus the emotions, like having this struggle. And logic and feelings and coming from very different places. I don't have a sun square Mercury, but boy, this feels accurate. Being in that place where your emotions are telling you one thing, but then there's the not trusting it, like wanting to always go to the logical place. All right. How many of you have a Venus hard aspect in your chart. Okay. First time this was an awareness, and I don't remember who was the speaker, but I was at a NORWAC conference when I lived in Seattle. I went for one day. That's all I could afford. So I got a one-day pass, drove over, went to NORWAC, and there was a woman standing up in front of the group, and it probably was Venus square the moon. I'm sure that was what the talk was on essentially. But she stood up, I'll never forget, she had this beautiful dress on, and she stood there and she had this pretty large crystal in her hand while she was speaking. And so she had quite a great presence. And she said, how many of you have, okay, it wasn't the topic of the talk, but she said, how many of you have a Venus or moon square Venus in your chart? And I looked around and like 80% of the group had that aspect. And I was like, oh my God, like, that was incredible. So this is about, there's a conflict between the emotions or mother or nurturance or safety or intuition versus love, how we feel loved, or our sense of value, or if we are valued. This is definitely, like, if I could sum this up from my experience with the people that I've worked with, if they have a Venus, or sorry, moon square Venus, this is not feeling loved by your mother. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you. That means your interpretation of it, your receiving of it doesn't fit. It's a sense of unlovability. Maybe your value or your value in the world, there's a sense of it being blocked, not recognized, or thwarted in some way. This can also show up as mother being unavailable or detached emotionally. It can also have an iteration of vulnerability in love, difficulty expressing feelings, difficulty in feeling safe in relationships, just overall feels unsupported in this territory of life. This can also show up as challenges with women or mother, basically, especially the opposition. One of the books that I've been working with is really a good book. It's a book called Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel. And for me, when I read this, she's not an astrologer, it's just a regular book. And when I read this, I was like, this is Venus and Venus and Moon and hard aspect. She says about not feeling loved or cared for by your mother. It's an injury. It's a heartbreak that forms from inadequate maternal nurturance, protection, or guidance in early development. Injury aptly describes mother hunger, which is what she's calling this, because living with it hurts all the time. It's like a grief, complicated grief that comes from carrying the unacknowledged, invisible burden all by yourself. And that it affects everything in your world, especially your relationship with others. So I think that's the point of the moon, is that this early work, this early imprinting now becomes what we carry into the world. And if we're unconscious, like, we're making a mess of things. But if we can bring it into consciousness, identify what's going on, get help with it, heal it, then we can start really improving our personal relationships. We're growing, we're maturing, and hopefully raising all of our vibrations. All right, so now we're going to get into a little bit of chart work. So who is the quintessential mother? Princess Diana. So here it is. Hold on here. I got to grab my notes. So when we see her chart, there's a couple of really interesting things. And I have done nothing but think about her chart since I kind of prepared all of this. So if we look here, we notice that here is her moon right here in Aquarius. Interesting. Conjunct the South Node. And she has an opposition with Uranus in Leo. She has a square to Venus. So that's why I'm pulling this up. So I use several online sources, and I didn't read Andrew Morton's book, but I found sources that quoted, I don't know if those of you who remember, he spent a lot of time with her, interviewing her. As I recall, wasn't it? Does anyone remember? It was like weeks and weeks or months and over a year's period of time. He would go into the palace and he would interview her about her life. So he had, firsthand access. And she did talk about that she had this very complex and difficult relationship with her mother, Moon square Venus. Now, there was another instance that I thought really brought this into play, because this is the relationship, but then she somehow ends up in a relationship with, this was during the engagement between, was this 80 or 81, between then Prince Charles and her. And the press asked, "Are you guys in love?" And she said, "Oh, of course we are." And he responded, "Whatever in love means, it's open to interpretation." And I was like, how odd. But wait, she has Moon in Aquarius. It's opposite Uranus. She is going to feel more comfortable with somebody who's a little odd. So at least that's my interpretation. So the press called them an odd couple, which I thought was really interesting. That stood out to me. She also broke protocol and tradition because then they said, "Oh, okay, royal couple, you have to go for 6 months to Australia and New Zealand and do this kind of tour." Whatever, the royals have a lot of responsibilities with the social work that they do. William was only 9 months old, and she said, "I absolutely," her son in Cancer, "absolutely will not leave my child." She insisted upon bringing him, which had never been done before. Any of the other mothers just left their children, no matter what age, with the nannies, and off they went. So she broke tradition. And that quote is hers right there, not connected to this, but just in general, something that she said was, "I am a free spirit," unfortunately for some. So even though she is this quintessential, she has the sun in Cancer, conjunct Mercury, she is definitely has this very free-spirited, independent nature. So I thought that was interesting about her. Yes.
Sandy
Sandy
has
has
a
a
question.
question.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah, I would like to point out that Venus in the fifth, okay, children, is squaring that Moon Uranus. I mean, that just jumped out at me when you were talking, like, oh my God, how accurate is this? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So going back a little bit, her father and mother divorced. There was a tremendous amount of pressure on her mother. She had two older sisters, and when her mother was pregnant with her, there was a tremendous amount of pressure that her father was putting on her mother that said, "You need a male, we need a male heir." He was a Viscount, something like that. I don't know. Thank you. Oh, thank you. So there was a lot of pressure. So think of this. When Diana was born, there had to have been some disappointment from father that it was not a male heir. When she was 7, Saturn square, her parents divorced in 1969. And at this particular time, we have the transiting Saturn was at her 4th house. So it was transiting Saturn moved from here when she was born and moved down here, which I think is very interesting. So we have that tension in the home. Her father won custody of the kids. So mother was now out of the picture and father remarried, and she has a stepmother. Now, so there was a mother figure in the home, and she is known to say that her childhood was described as very unhappy and very unstable. And this was according to Andrew Morton with his interviewing of her. So, I thought I would just show, this is an event that happened, and I don't have the date. I could not find the exact date. They just, in the press, all they've said is in January of 1982, Princess Diana was 12 weeks pregnant with William, and she deliberately threw herself down the stairs in the royal residence. She was so despondent. She was feeling so despondent and inadequate in her marriage to Charles. So we notice that we have the progressed sun is opposite Saturn. And of course, the progressed Saturn's going to be there, but we have this anaretic degree, this 29 degrees of her progressed sun was feeling this pressure and chaos. And then we look to see what else is happening. I threw the transits on here. And so while that is happening, we also have, this is the transits out here. We also have a T-square with Pluto, Saturn, and it's a really wide orb, but Mars is in there. And I don't know, so I just chose January 15th because they just said January 1982. And notice also, just as a side note, we have in her natal chart, we have Pluto and Mars here, and it is square Uranus. So a lot was happening. So we can see that she had a lot of stress at this particular time of her life. All right, feels too soon to move on. Any yeah. So for me, when I struck this particular moment, it was just like, oh, there's so much in her that feels untenable, right? What is she going to do with her life? Because, you know, I'm hoping you guys remember, how many of you guys all know, you know way more than I do about the royal story, but he was 13 years her senior, and she married him. She was pretty young, 61. They got married yeah, she was very young. She was in her 20s. And he was in love with this other woman, but he could not marry her. Was it because she wasn't a royal? Oh, she was married. Oh, just that. Just married. Yeah. So, and of course, when your partner has his flame, you know, his heart is somewhere else, it would be very devastating. It would be very devastating to kind of continue with that. So she had a very beautiful life with her public work and how the public loved her, but yet she was pretty tough for her. So we notice in this case that she does have the Venus square the moon, and she has the opposition to Uranus. And I would even plug Mars in there. That's really close. But all right, so we're going to move on to Mars. So I'll have a few chart examples kind of just scattered throughout. So Mars is about, again, the emotions, mothering, and so on is in a challenging aspect to this nature that wants to do things. It wants to have action. There's a protective quality to Mars, but it's also about initiative, right? So it's doing things first, being the pioneer. But when we look at the hard aspects, this could speak to an angry mother or emotional courage. Could be difficulty expressing emotions, Or it could be about response to nurturing coming in fast. Again, Mars doesn't like to stay very long in one place. It wants to do things and get it over and move on to the next. There is a strong need to react. There's a strong need to do something, strong need to fix. But I would say overall difficulty with emotions. Often I think it's can be so much difficulty that there becomes the projection piece, especially with Mars, right? So it's not, I'm not the one who's angry. You're the one who's angry because the anger is within, right? It's bubbling within, and the expression is from other people, especially in oppositions, to see it. Mars Moon connections can be too honest and direct, can be my gosh, absolutely impulsive. And it also, because it's Mars, there can also be this instinctual sexual response. There can also be this sullen, smoldering sexual vibe underneath. That's the picture. You can tell a woman put this together. But with the Mars in there, that there is that potential. And sometimes, especially with the opposition, that men who have this signature may possibly feel threatened by powerful, assertive women. All right, Jupiter. Moon-Jupiter connections. Everything's expanded. So emotions are big. This can be overreaction, over-response, over-protection. It can be idealistic thinking. It could be, for a female, it could be supermother syndrome, which is trying to be everything to everyone, trying to make everything perfect or right. It's exaggerated behavior. Could be mood swings, vast mood swings. Another iteration when we think about beliefs or socialization is there's potentially with this, there's a need to spread wings and have freedom or to explore. But overall, there's a need for something that's always reaching for something more and something bigger. And that often there's a discernment issue, like not being able to know when enough is enough, like having good boundaries. Moon, Saturn. Saturn is often, I always think of the limitations first. Saturn is about framework and structure. Yes, it's limitation, but that can be a good thing, especially just off the heels of Jupiter. But it's also about mastery and accomplishment. It's doing the hard work so that the rewards come, but it's not until after you've done the work. So Moon, Saturn is a little bit of a dampening effect, right? Emotions can maybe be challenged by rigid rules, whether they're self-imposed or societal. There's a serious nature often to the person. They might have stifled emotions or where they're really reticent. When we think about it from the lens of mother, it could be an apparent coldness of your mother or the mother. Challenges in expressing feelings, may have bouts of depression. I know just recently when I had a transit, Saturn transiting my moon, it was like, oh, why am I so sad? And I had to pull up my transits and went, oh, okay, well, this won't last. But yeah, I was definitely feeling it. So Moon Saturn can also be defensive. Feeling responsible too early in life, maybe being a surrogate mother to siblings or being a surrogate mother to your own mother. It's about being an island of yourself, being emotionally self-sufficient. or it could be a resistance to mothering or control, again, controlling the emotions. All right, so I have a chart example for you of somebody who has, I think, a really good example of Moon Saturn. All right, Angelina Jolie. For those of you who don't know, this fabulous femme fatale, she is an award-winning actor known for movies such as Girl Interrupted, which is what I usually think of her. If you haven't seen it, it's a fabulous film from early in her career. Changeling and Maleficent. Her roles are often plutonic, in my opinion. She plays dark and powerful characters, not always dark, but always powerful, or dark, or both. So we notice in her chart, she has the moon, Mars, up here in opposition to Pluto and square Saturn in Cancer. Let me pull up my notes on her. So this is so interesting. Moon square Saturn. Her father was absent, and we know her father is John Voight. So she has quoted saying that he just showed up for her birthdays and holidays. So other than that, he was not really in the picture when she was growing up. And as a young actor, she actually changed her middle name due to her strained relationship with her father. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't tell you that. You guys know this, though. Saturn represents the father in our chart. Totally forgot that piece. So it's either Sun or Saturn. She eventually made it official, legally changing her surname to Jolie in 2002. And she says, quote, "I don't want to make public the reasons for my bad relationship with my father. After all of these years, I have determined that it is not healthy for me to be around him." So there is that dynamic. Now, her parents split when she was a toddler. She was raised by her mother. And I just found this quote the other day. I love quotes, but she says, "In my early 20s, I thought this was funny. I was fighting with myself. And now I take that punk," she calls herself a punk because she had a punk phase, "with me to Washington when I fight for something important." So at 14, Pluto, Moon, Mars, this is how I see this, maybe Uranus, Venus. She says, quote, quoted out of Cosmopolitan magazine, "I was either going to be reckless on the streets with my boyfriend, or he was going to be with me in my bedroom and my mom in the next room because I was going to have a boyfriend." So she is this incredibly rebellious. I believe at 16, she quit school and decided to go full-time with her career. Very independent young woman. Lived a pretty, I mean, she said it right there, reckless. And Uranus is down here, squaring her moon, sorry, her Venus, right on the ascendant. But we have this woman who, and again, I see this as Moon Pluto opposition in her chart. And it's interesting with actors because they don't necessarily live these, but they can pull this energy out when they play these roles. And when she played, how many of you are familiar with Girl Interrupted? How many of you have seen that? Oh my gosh. That's it? You, Frank? Lisa, you haven't seen it? Oh, such a good film. It's one of her, she was quite young when she did it. Winona Ryder's in it. I really liked it. So she played a sociopath by the name of Lisa. And she earned the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress that year. And so this is what Angelina says about this character. She said, "To be honest, there's a lot of Lisa in me. And I have certainly been told a lot of times that I'm dark or that people think I'm crazy. I didn't think Lisa was insane and that she deserved to be locked up." So this is a story about a bunch of young girls who were locked up in a mental institution. And it's quite edgy and dark, but you know, if you got enough Pluto or Scorpio in your chart, you're gonna love it. So I'm not suggesting that Moon Pluto contacts are about mental illness, but this statement that she makes about this character that she plays, it feels so accurate to me about Moon Pluto and the intensity of emotions, and that people think I'm crazy. So, oh, I have more. I knew there was more for her. Yeah.
Anything we'd like to comment?
Okay, sure.
Sandy?
No, I just raised my hand because I saw the movie and I thought it was a 10. And oddly enough, her performance really eclipsed the alleged star, which was Winona Ryder. I mean, she totally aced it.
Yeah. I completely agree, Sandy, because I thought she was the star. I was surprised when I read that she had the supporting actress, because she's the one that's memorable to me. Yeah. 100%. All right. Looking at her chart, later in her life, she has Moon conjunct Jupiter, and it's right up here on the midheaven. And we know her as generous and brave, a traveler. Jupiter in the 9th house, has children from foreign countries, children from different cultures. And Moon conjunct Mars, I would say this is the piece of her that's the emotional person, the impulsive person who acts without thinking. I cannot erase from my brain those couple of years that she was married to Billy Bob Thornton. Talk about a tumultuous relationship. You know, they had little vials of each other's blood that they wore, and you know, in necklaces. I mean, it was pretty out there in terms of, you know, acting out her behavior or really kind of living these different pieces of herself. In 2001, she was a Goodwill ambassador for the United Nations Refugee Agency. She's won several awards on that front, and she has done work to obtain aid for refugees in countries like Cambodia, Tanzania, Pakistan, Darfur, and Jordan. So she has done a tremendous amount of work off screen and contributed like a large portion of her money as well to these things. At 37, she had a health scare where she underwent a double mastectomy to prevent breast cancer in the future. And because she was both a mother and because both her mother and grandmother died of cancer. And she is known to say, we come to love by finding the perfect person. Sorry, not by finding the perfect person, but by learning to see an imperfect person perfectly, which I just love that sentiment. It's about, you are who you are. Yeah, we're all flawed, but, you know, make the best of it. So you can tell she's one of my favorites. All right, I'm going to cover Chiron. So Chiron is about, again, emotions versus woundedness. Mother may be the source of wound. How am I doing on time, by the way? Does anybody? Yeah, I'm good. Okay. The relationship with mother could be the source of the wound. She may be the source of it. Maybe we feel or could feel rejected or abandoned at a critical stage in our lives. That she may have been emotionally inadequate to meet our needs. Maybe mother resented being a mother. Maybe she felt like without having a choice, especially in an earlier time when women didn't necessarily have a choice of carrying a child or not, that she might have felt some resentment, right? And had better things to do. So there's lots of ways this wound can come out when it's connected with the moon. But being acutely aware of other people's feelings is definitely somebody who has the moon Chiron, is they see the woundedness in others. They don't necessarily aren't the wounding people. They can be. I would say not that I've noticed a lot, but there is something about paying attention to others, because that's way easier than addressing what feels hurt and wounded in yourselves. But generally with Chiron, definitely connected to the moon, it's about feeling inadequate. I was reading some of Melanie Reinhardt's book, Chiron and the Healing Journey. And she says, in any planet and aspect to Chiron, up to and including Saturn, its principle may be wounded. But it may be a blind spot in the psyche where we do for others what we cannot do for ourselves. So that for me really ties that Chiron in, is that to become the healer is you must heal within first. So it's easy to look at other people and see how they need to be fixed. But it's looking at our own stuff that can be the hard work. So we can be wounded in relation to our mothers, could be in relation to the nurturance that we receive or we give. But wound surrounds, again, this is Melanie Reinhardt, the wound surrounds a repression or a persecuting of our instinctual self. So this could be an emotional struggle, a struggle with self-confidence. It may point to unresolved family issues, maybe even in the maternal line, that therefore need attention and healing. All right. I know some of you are very familiar with Betty Friedan. Born in 1921, she was the author of The Feminine Mystique, which I was shocked it was published in 1963, before I was born. But yet when I was a young woman, it was a book I definitely sought out to read because I had heard so much about it. It is widely credited as sparking the second wave of feminism in the United States. It was a groundbreaking book. Gail, did you read it? The Feminine Mystique? No? Oh, okay. Maybe it was just me. So her story is that she was restless as a homemaker and began to wonder if other women felt the same way. She had 3 children. She went to college, got her degree, and then lost a job, had children, and then was this mother at home, which of course she would be in the 50s. And when her children were a little bit older and more self-sufficient, she did some research and asked these other college women and said, how do you feel about being a mother? Because I feel like I've got more to do with my life than just be a stay-at-home mom. This became the groundbreaking work that became the Feminine Mystique. She was one of 28 founders of the National Organization for Women, which is now, I have a really funny story. When I was in San Francisco and I was probably 19, I was in college, and one of my girlfriends, it was in San Francisco, so we decided to go to Berkeley one day, and we were just wandering around just a block from the Berkeley campus. And we're wandering around and we heard these women, they were like, come to our meeting. And it was a meeting for NOW. And I had no idea. I was like, what's NOW? And we get in there. These women were, we're talking like 1983. And these women they were just so ferocious. I mean, they were absolutely upset about something that was happening in politics. And here we are, we're like, loo, 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 go into this meeting, and it was completely like, I was so overwhelmed by the energy, but I will never forget it. And little did I know, years later. So if we look at her chart, I absolutely love this. We have the moon opposite Pluto in Cancer, that generation, of course. But think about it. Here she is on a mission to change the archetype, the social archetype of what women could do in that era. This is right before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So, lots of groups of people, including women, were really wanting rights and protections and a voice within our country. So, and she has a square to Chiron and Venus. But I just saw that Pluto signature and thought, there you go. Pluto Mars, she is transforming what women can do. Not that you can't be a stay-at-home mom, but yet there's more to your life. All right, Uranus, Moon Uranus. Moon Uranus, often there's a struggle between the nurturance, the mothering, and the freedom. So this could show up as emotional independence, rebellious feelings, changing moods, need for space and freedom. Above all, there's a restlessness with Moon Uranus connections. Need for space and freedom. Hates to feel fenced in by emotions or domestic life. Did I say hates? That's a little strong. It's not comfortable. Often there can be a childhood signature of trauma. Was it Mark Jones that says Uranus is like the trauma signature? I'm just having this thought. Sorry. All right, I'm going to speed this up. Neptune. Moon Neptune, again, Neptune being such a psychic channel, there can be overall a lack of boundaries, not being able to really make things really concrete and linear. So it can be this volleying between idealism on one side and deception on the other in terms of being sensitive, the emotions. Mother may exhibit some sort of a victim mentality in some cases, or the wish to be rescued. So it's this idea of waiting for the white knight to rescue you. Children who have these, who grow up to be adults, of course, but as a child, feeling like you can't quite reach your mother. You can't quite connect with her. There's something elusive about her. It doesn't mean that she's not home or she's not available, but there's something about her. It's just there's a piece that's missing. She's just out of reach in some way. Could be there's an idealized version of mother. And often with the moon, which is also very intuitive and has, it's a water, it rules water and tides and everything. So there could be this absorbing nature to the feelings and struggling with boundaries. So not, especially when young, not knowing that what you're picking up on is not necessarily yours. And it's the discernment that comes later and with experience that can be dissipated. All right, Pluto. Moon Pluto connections. Anybody in here in person have a Moon Pluto connection? Okay. So Pluto is about power and control. It's about transformation, but the transformation cannot occur until things have drastically changed. You have to make room for the new, which means often whatever has existed before has to be obliterated. With Moon Pluto, often there's buried feelings, things that need to stay secret and hidden, because Moon Pluto connections speak to a space because of the intensity. They may often feel invaded or intruded upon, which is why, especially if we think of Scorpio, right? A Scorpio moon, they need lots of privacy and space because they want to keep things to themselves. Because if you share with others how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and so on, that's a very vulnerable place. And the Pluto moon connection does not like vulnerability because it's not safe, right? You can only trust yourself. The Pluto moon connection likes to dive deeply into feeling. The transformation can be a purge, and then it can become a catalyst. Skeletons in the closet, inherited family wounds are a part of this territory often. There's also issues with power and dominance. A sexual wounding is often at play with the Pluto, because if we think about the mythology of Pluto and the story of taking Persephone into the underworld, right? So if we go back to that mythology, so the moon Pluto may have that type of story in the background. It often doesn't feel safe for moon Pluto to expose one's feelings. They can also be afraid of power and dominance, especially over them. And they're very aware of sensitive nature and misuse of power. I should have done these backwards. It's such a heavy note to end on. Such a heavy note. All right. So, yeah, I definitely should have ended with something light. So, I think the moon in hard aspects to planets is such a rich territory for healing and for change and transformation that I would like to see this be I think we're on the threshold. I think especially with the threats to women's rights and security and safety, that there's, that this is a territory that needs more awareness, needs opening up so that we can heal and move on. The impetus for me to change came, if we go back to the thread of my two sisters and myself, the three of us having very similar experiences with our mother, but yet handling it in so various different ways. For me, I was a hurt young girl. And then when I had my daughter, I couldn't fathom having my daughter be upset with me or angry with me when all of us, doesn't matter we're mothers or fathers or not, we're all just bumping along in life doing the very best we can. And for me, it was that was a turning point where I said, I have to get a handle on this through the astrology. I learned all of this information about what my chart means. I could forgive myself, was able to really reach for that healing, still working on it. But my mother was also a very wounded person. I just lost her in December. So, and then I had a granddaughter a month ago. So I am now the senior matriarch in my family, which feels kind of cool. But it's been a lot of stuff to deal with. And all I can think about is that metaphor of the onion and peeling the onion. And that when we think we've done all the work and we're done, then something happens and you get to another layer and there's more to unpack. So I hope that you actually have maybe thought about the moon, because I think it's often overlooked because it's maybe not the sexiest planet to be studying out there, because it feels like we all know it so well because it's so present in our lives. But there is tremendous, tremendous material to be unearthed with the moon and embrace more fully as our closest ally to us and our most present out there and mysterious at all times. So I would ask you to seek for healing in your lives how you can. But my favorite quote comes from The Untethered Soul that Michael Singer wrote, and it says, real transformation begins when you embrace your problems as agents for growth. So this is me. If you at all are interested, I would love for you to follow me. I have a YouTube channel that will soon have a bunch of videos on the moon as I start interviewing astrologers to talk about their moon and how it shows up in their lives. I'm also on Instagram, my newsletter, and then I post on Substack, and I'm on Facebook. The next event that I'm doing is actually in the end of April for OPA's, which is the Organization for Professional Astrology, their AstroBiz Summit. So I'm doing a talk for them, and that's it. But yeah, I'll be starting to share things about what I've discovered through my writing and excerpts from the book. I'll be sharing that on my newsletter on Substack soon. So if you would, I would love it if you would share, because as I'm starting to think about publishing, all these publishers want to know is what you're following, who's following you. So numbers do count. So that would be helpful. Anyway, thank you so much. And I thank you, Tucson Astrologers Guild. I appreciate you. Thanks.